My fiancée didn't just cheat. She handed my life's work to a billionaire who tried to buy me. Imagine waking up one morning expecting to celebrate the biggest launch of your career, only to find that the woman you trusted with your future had vanished. And so had the prototype that could have changed your life forever. That was the day everything inside me snapped. And the moment I realized betrayal isn't always about love. It's about power. If you enjoy stories where betrayal meets revenge and the ending flips everything upside down, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this one. I promise, it only gets crazier from here. Let me take you back. I was Derek Nash, a quiet, socially awkward guy in his 30s who lived mostly inside lines of code. People called me a genius in cybersecurity, but the truth was simpler. I just thought differently. While most companies built fences around their data, I built labyrinths, structures so complex and yet so elegant that even state-level hackers would choke trying to break them. My masterpiece was CipherLock, a platform that could have rewritten the rules of digital security. Investors were already circling, tech blogs were whispering, and the launch was scheduled for the following week. Maya, my fiancée, was my anchor through all of this. At least, that's what I thought. She had been by my side for 3 years, encouraging me during late-night coding sessions, making coffee when my eyes burned from staring at screens. She wasn't just the woman I wanted to marry. She was the one person I trusted to see me at my weakest. And because of that trust, she had access. Not full access, but just enough to peek into my private repositories and internal notes. At the time, I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? She was family to me. The cracks started small. Late texts she wouldn't explain. Nights where she claimed to be out with friends, but came home smelling like expensive cologne I didn't own. I told myself I was paranoid, just a workaholic seeing ghosts and shadows. But paranoia turned into reality the night I noticed an unusual login attempt on my server logs. The IP address didn't make sense. It was bouncing through VPNs, masking itself with sophistication I'd only expect from corporate spies. But I traced it back, and what I found burned me alive. The connection had originated from my own apartment. From Maya's laptop. My stomach dropped, but the story didn't end there. Within hours, I tracked outbound traffic pointing straight to one of the shell companies owned by Colton Rayner. Now, if you don't know the name, let me paint the picture. Rayner was the golden boy of Silicon Valley. Billionaire by 35, known for throwing extravagant yacht parties where deals were signed over champagne and smoke. To the public, he was a visionary. To people like me, independents fighting to keep their innovations pure, he was a vulture. Twice before, he had tried to buy CipherLock, and twice I told him no. His response was polite but loaded. Everyone sells eventually, Derek. Everyone. Apparently, Maya had decided to prove him right. That I confronted her that night. She didn't deny it. She didn't even flinch when I laid out the IP logs, the shell company, the sudden coincidences. Instead, she gave me a look I'll never forget, half pity, half disgust. Derek, she said, you could have been so much more if you stopped hiding behind your code. Colton sees potential in me, in us. You'll never reach that level. Her words sliced deeper than any betrayal of the heart. She hadn't just chosen another man. She had chosen another future, one that didn't have room for me. She packed her bags the same night, walking out with a designer suitcase I didn't even know she owned. By morning, she was gone. What she didn't know, what he didn't know, was that I wasn't just some naive coder who left everything lying around. I had built CipherLock with layers of misdirection, decoy algorithms, false commits, mathematical dead ends. The fragment she took was dangerous in the wrong hands, but incomplete. Without the missing pieces in my head, it was like trying to solve a puzzle with only a third of the pieces and half of them from a different box. Still, it didn't matter in the moment. The woman I loved had betrayed me for power and wealth. The project I poured my soul into was now in the clutches of the man I despised most. I spent that night staring at my monitors, the glow of green code blurring through tears I didn't want to admit existed. Everything I had built seemed to collapse in on itself. But here's the thing about collapse. Sometimes it's not the end. Sometimes it's demolition. And demolition clears the ground for something bigger, stronger, unstoppable. That was the night I stopped being just Derek Nash, the awkward genius in the shadows. That was the night I decided to become the ghost Colton Rayner would never see coming. The ghost that would dismantle his empire piece by piece. using nothing but my brain, my patience, and his own arrogance. And it all started with a single line of code I wrote at 3:17 in the morning. As tears dried on my keyboard and fury settled into something sharper, something permanent. The morning after Maya walked out, I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't eat. I didn't shower. I sat in front of my screens and stared at the fragments of cipherlock left behind like pieces of a shattered mirror. My world was supposed to be on fire with celebration. Instead, it was ash. And in that ash, I had to find something new, or burn out completely. The first thing I did was tear into the code. Every repository, every backup, every hidden partition. I hunted for what she took, and to my surprise, I realized she hadn't given him everything. Not even close. She had only stolen what she could understand, and what Colton thought he could use. But cipherlock wasn't just math on a screen. It was layers of deception only I could navigate. Without the missing formulas in my head, Rayner's team had a loaded gun without a trigger. That realization changed something in me. Instead of feeling like a victim, I started to feel like a hunter. I had baited the trap years ago without even knowing it. Maya thought she was delivering gold, but she was really handing Colton a bomb with no manual. And now I had time to design the fuse. I built myself a war room, cleared every wall of my apartment, and covered them with whiteboards. Equations, market charts, names of Colton's subsidiaries, screenshots of his press releases, all mapped out like a conspiracy board. I taped Maya's farewell note in the center, not because I wanted to stare at her words, but because I wanted to remember. Every plan I drew, every move I made, I anchored it on that betrayal. The next step wasn't just about code. It was about people. For 3 years, I'd kept my circle small. But there were 2 people I trusted like family. Alex, my old college roommate who now ran a boutique legal consultancy, and Jenna, a systems architect who had saved my skin once during a freelance job. They weren't just smart, they were loyal. And loyalty, I had learned, was rarer than diamonds. When I called Alex, I expected questions, doubt, maybe even laughter at my paranoia. But instead, he went quiet. Then he said, "If Rayner's involved, you'll need armor thicker than patents. You'll need shadows." That's when the idea hit me. I wouldn't fight Rayner in the open, not yet. I'd build something he couldn't see, couldn't predict. A company so hidden it would look like a ghost. A shell startup that could move through his ecosystem without raising alarms, feeding him crumbs while I set the table for the real feast. Jenna came on board first. I pitched it to her bluntly. I want to build software that looks ordinary but proves a point. I want to show the world Rayner doesn't understand what he's selling. She laughed, not because it was funny, but because she liked the audacity. She agreed before I finished the call. Within weeks, the 3 of us had an LLC registered under a nondescript name, Latticecore Solutions. It looked like a data services vendor, the kind companies hired for grunt work. No flashy branding, no LinkedIn fanfare. Just a logo that looked like it had been designed by an intern. And that was the point. Behind the curtain, we were building something entirely different. I started writing mirror code, features that mimicked what Rayner's team would try to build from my stolen fragment, but with deliberate cracks in the foundation. Cracks only I could predict. When they copied or rushed to beat me, they'd end up chasing shadows. Meanwhile, Alex wove legal protection into everything. Trademark filings, provisional patents, shell agreements that looped back to us in hidden clauses. He called it legal tripwire. If Rayner tried to step too close, he'd trigger alarms without realizing it. For months, we worked in silence. No press, no announcements, just quiet progress. But I didn't disappear. I showed up at conferences, low-key panels, podcasts, never trashing Colton, but planting seeds. Talking about resilience, about integrity and cybersecurity. People remembered. They listened. My name began to glow again, not because I shouted, but because I whispered in the right places. And then, one night, while running penetration tests on our prototype, I found something unexpected. Traces of activity that didn't belong. Someone had been testing the same cipher fragment Maya had leaked, but their implementation was messy, flawed. It was Rayner's team, tripping over the incomplete code like kids playing with matches. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. They thought they were ahead. They thought they had stolen the crown jewel. But I knew the truth. They were already playing my game, and I was just getting started. When I say we built a ghost, I mean it. Latticecore Solutions looked boring, predictable, and forgettable on the surface. We rented a small office in a strip mall between a tax service and a nail salon. No fancy lobby, no glossy branding, just a dusty sign and a front desk with one plant that barely survived the week. That was by design. We didn't want to look like innovators. We wanted to look invisible. Inside, though, it was a different story. We stripped the drop ceiling to run cables, lined the walls with white boards, and stacked servers in a corner humming like a restless hive. Jenna handled the architecture, Alex worked his legal magic, and I obsessed over the code. Every night felt like we were carving secret tunnels under Rayner's empire, and he had no idea. The first trap we built was simple: mimicry. I knew exactly how Rayner's engineers would try to patch together my stolen fragment. So I created a product feature that looked almost identical, but I left behind a quiet tell. A piece of logic that only I would recognize. If their engineers copied it, I'd see it light up in the wild. It was like signing my name with invisible ink across their stolen work. 2 months later, I saw the first spark. A client demoed Rayner's so-called breakthrough, and tucked inside was my invisible signature. I felt my jaw clench. Proof. They were already feeding off my scraps. I didn't rant. I didn't rage. I smiled. Because now I knew I could track them, like a hunter tagging prey. Meanwhile, Alex was setting up something far colder: contracts laced with hidden hooks. We offered basic data services to mid-size firms that also happened to be in Rayner's supply chain. Nothing flashy, just affordable, reliable tools. But inside every license agreement was language. That gave us insight into performance. Data. Legal. Clean. Transparent. But in the right hands, my hands, that data became a radar screen showing exactly how Rayner's team was stumbling. Jenna, though, she wanted fire. Why not go public? She asked one night, slamming an energy drink on the desk. We could blow the whistle, Derek. We could ruin him today. I shook my head. Too soon. If we burn him now, he'll recover. I don't want recovery. I want collapse. She leaned back, half annoyed, half impressed. You're colder than I thought. Maybe I was. Or maybe betrayal had burned the warmth out of me. By the third month, the ghost company wasn't just alive. It was feeding. We quietly onboarded 2 medium clients. Company's Rayner's sales team had been circling for months. We didn't undercut him with price. We outperformed him with reliability. When our tools didn't crash, didn't corrupt files, didn't force restarts, the word spread. Not loud, not viral, just whispers in boardrooms. Maybe Rayner isn't the only game in town. Then came the first confrontation. I was at a small cybersecurity mixer. The kind with lukewarm cocktails and people pretending not to recruit each other. And there he was, Colton Rayner, all polished smile and tailored suit, holding court like a king among peasants. He spotted me across the room. His grin sharpened. Derek Nash, he said, cutting through the crowd like a shark through water. I heard you've been busy. I kept my tone calm, almost bored. Just consulting. Little projects. Nothing that would interest you. His eyes narrowed. You always did like to play small. It's a shame. Maya tells me you had real potential. Hearing her name in his mouth was like swallowing glass, but I didn't flinch. I smiled instead. Funny. Potential's a dangerous word. Sometimes it's just another way of saying unfinished. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a riddle. Then he chuckled, clapped me on the shoulder, and walked away. But I saw it. A flicker in his eyes. Doubt. Suspicion. That night, back in the office, I stared at the whiteboards covered in arrows and equations. Rayner thought I was playing small. Good. That was the cover I needed. Because while he was busy underestimating me, I was already inside his walls, tracing his steps, turning his stolen code into a leash I could yank whenever I wanted. The ghost company wasn't just surviving. It was becoming a weapon, and soon, Rayner would feel its bite. By the 4th month, our ghost company had a pulse of its own. Clients were trickling in, contracts were stacking up, and whispers about our strange reliability were floating through circles I didn't even know we'd reached. But growth wasn't my endgame. My real goal was to make Rayner bleed without realizing where the cut came from. That's when I launched the Light tool. On paper, it was nothing fancy, just a free app that promised basic encryption for small businesses. Anyone could download it, anyone could use it. But what it actually did was much more subtle. Every time it ran, it quietly recorded where systems were struggling, which features people actually used, and, most importantly, when they switched from another vendor. Vendors like Rainer.to the public, it looked like generosity. To me, it was reconnaissance. Within weeks, thousands of small companies downloaded it. IT managers posted online about how Latticecore's freebie was easier to use than Rainer's premium tools. I didn't have to say a word. The market was doing the talking for me. Still, I needed something sharper. Something public. The chance came during a regional cybersecurity expo. It wasn't a huge event. No red carpets, no billion-dollar CEOs. Just developers, mid-tier executives, and a handful of analysts with more Twitter followers than budgets. But that was exactly why it was perfect. Big enough to matter, small enough to avoid Rainer's radar, I signed up for a modest booth, nothing flashy. A folding table, a pull-up banner with our bland Latticecore logo, and a laptop running the light tool. Most people strolled past without a glance. That was fine, because the ones who stopped saw something that made their eyes widen. During live demos, I showed them side-by-side comparisons. Our light tool versus Rainer's commercial product. Same tasks, same inputs. His software froze, crashed, or chewed up resources like a starving monster. Ours just worked. Clean. Fast. Reliable. The room filled with whispers. Some people laughed under their breath. Others pulled out phones to record. I didn't insult Rainer directly, didn't even mention his name. But every person in that room knew exactly whose product I was showing up. That by the end of the expo, 3 mid-sized companies had asked for follow-up meetings. And more importantly, an analyst live-tweeted the demo. His thread went viral in the tech community. Screenshots of Rainer's lagging empire spread like wildfire. 2 days later, Jenna burst into the office, waving her phone. "You've got to see this." On the screen was a LinkedIn post from one of Rainer's flagship clients. It read, "We're reconsidering our security vendors after seeing certain reliability issues in the field. Exploring alternatives." Alternatives. I didn't need them to say our name. I knew where they were looking. That night, as I walked home through the city lights, I caught myself smiling. Not the bitter smile I wore when Maya left. Not the forced smile I gave at networking events. A real one. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was proof. Proof that I could fight giants without throwing a single punch. But victories like that come with noise. And noise attracts attention. A week later, Alex forwarded me an email from a contact inside Rainer's company. It was short, blunt, and to the point. "Colton knows. He's asking questions. He's watching you." I read it twice, then 3 times. The words didn't scare me. They energized me. Because if Colton was finally looking my way, it meant one thing. The ghost had stepped out of the shadows, and the game was officially on. Colton Rainer was a man who hated being laughed at. And after the expo, the whispers around the industry weren't whispers anymore. They were chuckles, smirks, and side comments at conferences. He'd invested millions in building himself up as untouchable, and suddenly people were questioning his crown. That was when I knew it was time to deliver the first real cut. Not enough to destroy him outright, just enough to make him bleed in front of his audience. I started by writing a white paper. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed revenge. It looked like a dry, technical document about advanced cipher structures. I sprinkled in equations, graphs, and academic jargon. But buried inside was something deliberate, a theoretical patch that looked elegant on the surface, but collapsed if you tried to implement it literally. I knew Rainer's engineers were desperate. They had been stumbling with the incomplete fragment of CipherLock, and my paper was the bait. Sure enough, within weeks, chatter on developer forums hinted at innovations that sounded suspiciously like my trap. Then came the fireworks. Rainer's company pushed a rushed update to their flagship encryption suite. Their marketing machine blasted it everywhere. Emails, press releases, bold claims about unbreakable security. For a week, the headlines sang his praises, but then the cracks appeared. The update didn't just fail, it broke existing systems. Businesses that relied on his software for daily operations found themselves locked out of their own files. Customer service lines flooded. Forums exploded with complaints. IT departments cursed his name. And while all this chaos unfolded, I was sitting calmly on a stage at a cybersecurity panel in San Francisco, sipping water and answering questions. "Derek, what do you think about the recent issues some vendors are facing?" The moderator asked with a smirk, clearly fishing. I leaned into the microphone, keeping my voice even. "I think it shows the danger of rushing code. Security isn't about speed, it's about resilience. If you cut corners, The cracks will always show. The audience chuckled. They knew exactly which vendor I meant. But I never said his name. That was the beauty of it. I didn't have to. After the panel, 3 executives approached me. Not fans. Not journalists. Clients. Big ones. They wanted stability, not fireworks. And I was offering it. Quietly. Calmly. Effectively. That night, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Maya. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My chest tightened. Curiosity won. I answered. Her voice was soft, almost rehearsed. Derek, I saw the news. Colton's under pressure. People are saying you. I cut her off. Don't. Don't pretend you're calling for me. Silence. Then a shaky breath. I made a mistake. I laughed, bitter and sharp. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door. You didn't make a mistake, Maya. You made a choice. She tried to explain, to paint herself as trapped, as someone swept up in promises too big to resist. But I wasn't the same man she left. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply said, you picked him, so stay with him. But don't call me when his empire starts burning. And I hung up. For the first time in months, I felt freed that Rayner's update had backfired spectacularly. His credibility took a hit, his clients were nervous, and the industry was starting to look at him not as a visionary, but as reckless. And Maya? Well, she had chosen her side. I looked around my office. At the whiteboards filled with equations and timelines. At Jenna passed out on the couch after another late-night coding sprint. At Alex still drafting contracts with bloodshot eyes that we weren't just a ghost company. Anymore that we were becoming the storm. And Colton Rayner had no umbrella. Rayner's failed update left more than broken systems. It left cracks in his empire. For years, companies bought his products because of his name, his reputation. But reputation is fragile. Once people start to doubt, the fall happens fast. And I was ready to push. Our chance came with 2 massive clients he had been chasing for months, a global logistics firm and a financial services company. These weren't just accounts, they were trophies. If he could land them, he'd restore his image. If I landed them, it would signal to the entire industry that the tide had turned. That we invited their IT directors into our tiny office. No marble floors, no polished pitch decks, just 3 tired faces. A whiteboard covered in formulas, and a laptop that ran smoother than anything they'd seen. Show us. One of them said flatly, so I did. First, I ran their data through Rayner's platform. The system stuttered, froze, and miscalculated edge cases it should have handled easily. Their director frowned, scribbling notes. Then I ran the exact same test through our prototype. The numbers lined up perfectly, every file intact, every process seamless. The room went silent. Then one of them chuckled under his breath. So the golden boy can't handle the basics? I didn't smile. I just leaned forward. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to show you a choice. You can buy a name, or you can buy peace of mind. They signed within a week. 2 flagship clients. 2 nails in Rayner's coffin, but I didn't stop there. At the upcoming developer summit, I booked a slot for a live demo. Nothing glamorous, just a technical showcase. I knew Rayner's team would be in the audience, watching, waiting for me to slip. Instead, they got a front row seat to their own humiliation. On stage, I projected side-by-side comparisons, real-time logs of how CipherLock's engine handled stress tests versus Rayner's product. I didn't accuse him. I didn't even mention his name. But when his software buckled under simulated attacks while mine stayed rock solid, the audience erupted in murmurs. Phones came out. Screens lit up. Hashtags started trending before I even left the stage. Afterward, journalists swarmed me. Derek, is this a direct challenge to Rayner Systems? I shook my head, calm and measured. No, it's not about rivalry. It's about responsibility. Security is about protecting people, not impressing shareholders. That quote ended up plastered across tech blogs, LinkedIn, even the Wall Street Journal's digital column. Suddenly, I wasn't just the underdog. I was the face of integrity in cybersecurity, and Rayner? He was on defense. His PR team scrambled to spin the narrative, blaming unforeseen bugs and promising fixes. But the damage was already done. Clients were no longer whispering. They were openly questioning him. That night, back at the office, Jenna was pacing, phone in hand. You know he's going to come after us, right? I nodded. Let him. She frowned. You sound too calm. Because I was. Every move he made, every stumble, every angry press release, It only tightened the net I'd been weaving since the night Maya left. He didn't realize it, but he wasn't fighting me. He was fighting his own shadow, and I was holding the flashlight. For the first time since this war began, I felt something close to peace. Not because it was over, but because I could finally see the endgame forming. Rayner wasn't just losing clients, he was losing the story. And once you lose the story, the empire follows. That be why the time the developer summit buzz faded, Rayner was wobbling, but not broken. Men like him never admit defeat, not even when it's staring them in the face. He doubled down, hiring new PR teams, promising innovations, throwing money at consultants to patch the cracks. That's when I decided to hit him where money couldn't save him: compliance. Every empire has skeletons in the closet, and Rayner's company was no exception. His subsidiaries operated in too many countries, juggling too many rules. All it would take was a little sunlight to show just how messy it all was. So we acquired a small compliance auditing firm, barely a dozen employees, tucked away in a bland office park. On the surface, it looked like a boring move. But through that firm, we gained a legal window straight into the guts of Rayner's empire. Vendor contracts, regulatory filings, audit reports. It all flowed across our desks, neat and official. I didn't touch anything illegal. I didn't need to. All I had to do was watch, and what we found was gold: double billing, conflict of interest disclosures that were conveniently forgotten, subsidiaries claiming compliance in regions where they hadn't even filed the paperwork. Nothing explosive enough to land him in handcuffs, but enough to show the cracks in the pristine image he sold to the world. Alex crafted the reports with surgical precision. Every word was factual, sourced, unimpeachable. We released them quietly, through industry newsletters, watchdog groups, small regulatory bulletins. Not tabloids, not gossip, cold, dry truth. And that truth spread faster than scandal ever could. At first, it was whispers. Did you see that audit? Rayner's firm didn't file in time. Then the whispers turned into murmurs. Why are so many subsidiaries cutting corners? Finally, it turned into headlines. Is Rayner's empire built on sand? I watched all of it unfold from my office window, sipping cold coffee while Jenna scrolled through her feed with a grin. You've turned him into a funhouse mirror, she said. Every time he looks at himself, he sees the cracks. She wasn't wrong, but the real crack came when one of his board members, an old finance veteran, resigned, citing ethical concerns. That resignation letter leaked online within hours. And once it did, clients who had been hesitating started bolting for the exits. The phone in our office wouldn't stop ringing. Companies wanted demos, audits, contracts. We couldn't keep up. For every deal we signed, 3 more waited in line. It wasn't just momentum, it was a tidal wave, and that tidal wave reached Colton himself. One night, my phone lit up with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was cold, steady, but laced with something new: desperation. You think you're clever, Derek, he said. But you don't understand the level you're playing at. I don't lose. I buy. I stayed silent for a moment, then asked quietly, then why haven't you bought me yet? The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my pulse steady. That call wasn't a threat, it was a warning. Colton was slipping, and he knew it. And when men like him slip, they don't fall gracefully. They drag down everything they can reach. But that was fine, because I was already 3 moves ahead. And the mirror maze I built for him was only just beginning to twist. Why now? Rayner wasn't just wounded, he was bleeding in public. Clients were slipping away, board members were restless, and his name was starting to sound more like a punchline than a promise. But men like him don't fade quietly. They gamble big, hoping one last move will rewrite the story. And that's exactly what he did. Colton announced a grand event in New York, a revolutionary platform reveal that would silence his critics once and for all. Invitations went out to press, investors, analysts, everyone who mattered in tech. The kind of stage where reputations are made or destroyed in a single hour. I knew what he was planning. His revolutionary platform would be built on the stolen fragment of CipherLock. He thought it would finally prove he had something I didn't. But what he didn't know was that I'd been waiting for this exact moment. Because I wasn't just going to humiliate him. I was going to take everything. The plan started months earlier when Alex uncovered a small, overlooked creditor note buried deep in Rayner's debt structure. Nothing flashy, just a corporate loan tied to his main subsidiary. But hidden inside was a covenant clause. If certain conditions were triggered, ownership could be converted. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Alex did, and he brought it to me like a loaded weapon wrapped in paper. We bought the note quietly, through layers of shell entities. On paper, it looked like a harmless investment. In reality, it was the foundation for a hostile takeover. All I had to do was wait for the right timing, when Colton would be standing on his stage, live streaming his triumph to the entire industry. And in that very moment, my lawyers would execute the conversion, flipping control of his core division into my hands. It would be a checkmate broadcast in real time. Jenna thought I was insane. You're telling me you're going to walk onto his stage and announce you own his company? That's not just revenge, Derek. That's theater. I smirked. Exactly. The weeks leading up to the event were brutal. Long nights drafting contracts, rehearsing contingency plans, double-checking every legal clause. Alex warned me again and again. If even one detail slips, this blows up in our faces. But nothing slipped. Every I dotted, every T crossed. The night before the event, I barely slept. I stood at my apartment window, watching the city lights flicker below, and thought about how far I'd come since the night Maya walked out. Back then, I was broken, hollow, drowning in betrayal. Now, I was about to take the stage not as a victim, but as the man who outplayed a billionaire at his own game. The morning of the event, New York buzzed with anticipation. Headlines hyped Rayner's reveal as the return of the king. Cameras flashed, journalists swarmed, investors packed the hall. I slipped into the audience with a plain suit and a calm smile. Unnoticed in the sea of suits and flashing badges, Colton walked on stage to thunderous applause. Beaming like a man who thought he had the world in his pocket, he launched into his speech, bragging about the future of security and groundbreaking innovation. Behind him, giant screens lit up with sleek animations and polished slogans. But as he spoke, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A single text from Alex. It's done. I felt my heart pound, not from nerves, but from anticipation. Because in that moment, while Colton was smiling for the cameras, he didn't realize he had just lost the crown, jewel of his empire, and I was seconds away from stepping into the spotlight to show him. The text from Alex kept flashing in my head as Colton strutted across the stage like a king. It's done. 3 words that meant his empire wasn't his anymore. The crowd didn't know it yet. Neither did he. He was in his element, pacing with the confidence of a showman. This, he declared, pointing at the giant screen behind him, is the future of cybersecurity. A platform no one else could dream of. I almost laughed. No one else could dream of it. I dreamed it. I built it. And he had stolen a fraction of it like a thief in the night. Then his demo began. The screens lit up with a polished interface. Applause echoed as the system ran simple encryption tests. But I could already see the flaws. It was my incomplete fragment wrapped in glitter. Under pressure, it would collapse. And everyone in that hall was seconds away from realizing it. But I wasn't here just to watch him stumble. I was here to end the game. As the applause faded, I rose from my seat and walked calmly toward the stage. Security noticed me, but I flashed a badge, an industry guest pass I'd secured through one of our shell firms. They hesitated, confused. By the time they moved, I was already climbing the steps. Colton's smile faltered when he saw me. Derek, he said into the microphone, his voice tight. What are you doing here? I took the second mic from the stand. My voice was steady. Finishing what you started. The audience went silent. Cameras zoomed in. Phones shot up. I turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. But what you're watching on this stage, it's not a breakthrough. It's a fragment. A fragment taken from Cypherlock years ago. Gasps rippled through the hall. Colton's face reddened. This is nonsense. He's a bitter rival trying to. I cut him off. No, Colton. I'm not your rival. I'm your majority shareholder. The room exploded. Reporters shouted. Investors scrambled to check their phones. Behind me, Alex's legal team moved into position, handing copies of the executed conversion to staff. On screen, the official filings hit the newswire. Live. Colton froze, blinking at the words. He didn't understand at first. Then the realization hit him like a train. The company he had bragged about seconds ago wasn't his anymore. It was mine. I leaned into the mic one last time. Effective immediately, this division and its assets are under new ownership. To the clients in this room, don't worry. Your data will be protected. To the industry, we will finish what CipherLock was meant to be. And to those who built on lies, I let the pause linger, my eyes locking on Colton. Your time is over. The hall erupted again, cameras flashing like lightning. Colton's mouth moved, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd known him. The king of the room had no script. I handed the mic back to the stand, walked off stage, and didn't look back. That was the moment I knew. The revenge wasn't just complete. It was poetic. He had tried to steal my future, and I took his in front of the whole world. And the best part? I never lifted a fist. Just a pen, a contract, and a plan. The night after the takeover, New York buzzed with headlines. Every screen in Times Square lit up with the same story. Billionaire loses company during his own keynote. Journalists called it historic. Analysts called it ruthless. I just called it closure. For the first time in years, I slept without waking up to check server logs or trace suspicious IPs. No paranoia. No shadows. Just silence. In the weeks that followed, the industry adjusted. Clients flooded in, not because I begged for them, but because trust had shifted. Rayner had been exposed as reckless. I had become the symbol of resilience. Investors, partners, even former rivals reached out. Everyone wanted a piece of CipherLock. But here's the truth. I didn't build this company for them. I built it for me, for the broken man staring at screens the night Maya walked out, for the guy who thought he had lost everything, only to realize betrayal was the spark he needed to rise higher than he ever dreamed. Speaking of Maya, she tried again. One afternoon, my assistant told me a visitor was waiting in the lobby. When I walked out, there she was. Same smile, same eyes, but something different this time. Desperation. "Derek," she said softly, "I made a mistake. I never thought it would go this far." I studied her for a long moment. Once, her voice would have melted me. Once, I would have fought the world just to keep her by my side. But that Derek was gone. "You didn't just leave me," I said quietly. "You sold me. And that's not something you come back from." Her eyes welled, but I didn't wait for more. I turned, walked back to the elevator, and never saw her again. Some might call that cold. But it wasn't revenge. It was clarity, because now I understood. The greatest victory isn't destroying someone else. It's refusing to let them destroy you. Today, CipherLock isn't just software. It's a platform that teaches companies how to survive betrayal, sabotage, and chaos. I mentor young developers, reminding them that their value doesn't come from flashy deals or smooth-talking billionaires. It comes from the resilience to stand back up when the world knocks you down. And me? I finally live. I travel. I laugh. I breathe. I'm not the bitter coder hunched over his keyboard anymore. I'm the man who turned betrayal into empire. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear Colton's voice in my head. I don't lose. I buy. And I smile. Because in the end, he didn't buy me. I bought him. And that's the story. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? What would you have done in my place? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more dramatic true stories. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts. Your support keeps these stories alive, and I'd love to hear if you think my revenge was justified or if I went too far.